It's been described as a chance to turn the page of hate. But can the agreement between the Mali government and Tuareg rebels finally end the crisis in this strategically important African country? And where does this leave the Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters still roaming the region? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. An important step towards peace in Mali. The government and Tuareg fighters have signed a deal that could finally reunite the country. The accord calls for an immediate ceasefire and for government troops to return to the northern rebel-held town of Kidal. The UN, the EU and France were all quick to praise the move. But will it bring an end to the rebellion that began a year and a half ago? Or was it merely allowing a presidential election to take place in Mali, including areas controlled by the Tuareg? Last year's rebellion saw them take over the north and create the independent Azawad region. And within that area, the Tuareg control the cities of Gao, Agalhok and, as we've mentioned, Kidal. A quick reminder of who the key players in Mali are. The Tuaregs, who staged a rebellion against the government last year. They are armed separatists fighting for independence from Bamako. They declared an independent state, that state being Azawad, in April last year. But the Tuareg rebellion was to some extent hijacked by Al-Qaeda-linked groups like Ansar Dine and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. They want to impose Islamic law across Mali. Amadou Sonago is the military officer who led a coup against Mali's president last year. He promised to crush the northern rebellion, but Mali's army was no match for the rebels, who tightened their grip on the north following that coup. Then in January, France launched a military intervention to hold back the rebel advance at the request of Mali's president. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our three guests. From Leeds, Akli Shika, spokesman for the Tuareg Youth Movement for Justice and Equality. From London, Alessandra Giuffrida, anthropologist and expert on Mali. From Geneva, Alexandre Vautravers, associate fellow at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy. But first, let's go to Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. And joining us on the line from there is Tibile Drame, Mali's chief negotiator and former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us and congratulations on this deal. Can you give us the details and why you believe it is important to the future of the country?
Well, this agreement is indeed a sort of international consensus on burning issues in Mali. I mean, the recognition of the national integrity of Mali, the recognition of the national unity, and also the recognition of this country should remain a republic. And this is extremely important. And this international consensus has been reinforced by the Security Council resolution 2100 adopted in April 25th.
Now, not everybody has signed the deal. Can you tell us about those players who are not part of this process and if that is cause for concern?
No. The agreement was signed between the government and the two rebel groups, two Tuareg groups. But two other groups decided to accept it. This is the Arab movement of Azawad and the organization from black settlers. So all Malian armed groups have reached this agreement, have accepted this agreement, and all have accepted that the Malian army should go back to Kidal as soon as the agreement is signed.
Can you guarantee that those living in Kidal will be safe when the army returns? As you know, allegations of abuse have been levelled at the army and Tuareg rebels.
One must say that most of these allegations do not have a serious ground. But we do take into account the concern expressed by the leaders of the armed groups in Kidal and some international actors. This is why we agreed that our army should go back in coordination with the international forces, I mean the several forces from France and the African troops who are already on the spot and who will be joined very soon by the United Nations peacekeeping mission.
All right, if this all goes according to plan, will you be including the insurgents in the political process going forwards?
Oh, definitely. This is the second step after the deployment of Malian troops. We agree that after the presidential elections, the elected president with such legitimacy will be in position to engage talks on the root causes of the instability and insecurity in northern Mali, involving not only armed groups, but also the representative of all the communities in northern Mali, in order to reach not only a lasting solution, but a final solution to the Malian crisis.
Well, it all sounds very exciting, and I do hope it goes well for you, Mr. Drame. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Actually, you are affected by this deal. Your people are affected by this deal. Do you support it? Are you equally buoyed by it?
Oh yes, absolutely. I support. But the problem is with this agreement, it has not specified has not attaching the problems of the Tuareg people. But yes, we support it, and I think the Tuareg are the winners.
What do you mean it's not attached with the Tuareg people?
Because this is not the end of the conflict. This is not the end of the problem. As long as we've seen the agreement, nothing says that straight away that the problem of what's the problem of the Tuareg people, which they have been fighting for almost 53 years now. But in terms of giving the chance for to pave a way of the elections, which are due in 28th of July, I think this is totally an political initiative of the partners who are involved in this agreement and putting pressure on both on the MNLA and the Malian government to let these elections go ahead. Nothing is specified in this agreement saying the Tuareg grievances are going to be solved or sorted out. And also, but what's important of me in this agreement is that the massacres that the Malian army since 1960s, as we all know, Malian army have been involved in killings, in massacres and ethnic cleansing against the Tuareg people in the north. I think the most important is that the community international have set a committee which is going to bring all these who committed atrocities against the Tuareg people to justice. This is what's actually, I think this is the most important article in this agreement.
Okay, you picked up quite a few points there, but let me just go to the other guests now and find out what their position is as far as this agreement is concerned. Alexandra, I believe that you think it's a success, a big success. Why is that?
It's a very important step because indeed what we have created with this agreement is really a foundation. We've created legitimacy for the international intervention led by France, but also regional powers around Mali. We've also created favorable conditions for the transformation of the governance and the political system in Mali. And I think that we will be seeing a lot more changes. Of course, it is true this agreement has all sorts of limits, and in particular, it does not address some very crucial, very important items. One of them that I didn't hear was whether this was talked about or not, is the question of autonomy of Azawad, representation of cultural minorities in Mali. The governance system will most probably change as a result of this agreement, and of course, the pressure of the international community. how exactly is this change, this transformation going to take place is not really addressed in this agreement. And thirdly, of course, the demilitarization of the country and in particular of some northern groups, of some Tuareg groups, is not explicitly addressed. All of these items have been left for after the presidential elections. But to summarize, this is really an important step for the country, for the region, for the international community, for the intervention, for a positive change in Mali.
Do you think the carrot was the fact that some arrest warrants were dropped against some of the leaders of the MNLA?
I think that there are probably comparisons that can be drawn with other conflicts in other parts of the world, but really the positive development of this agreement is twofold: creating a coalition and an understanding, a coalition against some very extremist, very how should I say, difficult to negotiate with parties. So I think that now we have a clear fault line between those who are prepared to work together towards a democratic, a transformed, a renewed state and government and economic development, and those, of course, who are not. And number two, we're creating favorable conditions for an international intervention by the United Nations and for these transformations and economic development to take place.
Alessandra, if I can read your face correctly, you didn't seem to agree with much of that. Why not?
Well, I think there's a real crucial point that we're not addressing. That point is that so far the international community and the Malian government has sought a military solution to a political problem. And although we all agree that military intervention perhaps was necessary to at least free the area from the terrorist threats, the problem remains that the culture of corruption and the great divisions within Malian society remain. And if these divisions are not in some way addressed through non-military action, then I do not see how just this political election can actually restore the fabric of civil society, which is indeed necessary for any future projects in Mali. What I can say is that as far as different Tuareg people I'm in touch with, including the refugee population, which is around 176,000, 90% of which are Tuareg, are saying that they do not really feel in any way protected by the agreements that have been signed in Ouaga the other day. But what reassures them in some ways is the presence of the UN in the process of peace negotiations. This suggests, in my view, that the legitimacy of the Malian government has not yet been restored. And
do you agree with that, Akli, that the legitimacy of the government hasn't been restored?
Oh yes, yes. But the as I said earlier, I think this is totally an initiative political agreement, to be honest, because as we all know, I don't think anybody in the Azawad regions, whether in Kidal or Timbuktu or other parties of the Azawad, is going to cast their votes. I don't think anybody, because I've seen a lot of campaigns going on all in the in refugee camps in Mauritania and Burkina Faso. And also there's a lot of campaign going on Facebook saying that send these ballot boxes back empty. And also,
and of course, if they don't vote, then the government gets their man.
Yes, yes, exactly. And also, you know, almost 70% of the population of Azawad today are in the, you know, in the neighboring countries. And also, I don't see any sense of this agreement. Although that's why the MNLA has won this, because they already know nobody is going to vote. And also, okay, let's give the chance for the mediators and the international community to see how Mali actually is going to be accepted or received in these areas. And as they know, as we all know, there's a lot of divisions as well among Bamako itself. We have a lot of political factions that's fighting each other in Bamako, between Sanogo's militia and also the politicians who want to loyal to the former president of Mali. Yeah, I can't see any success for this agreement. The only thing I am.
All right, let me bring in Alexandra here and pick your military strategic brain over these points that were raised by both guests, actually. The military intervention, the fact that that is being used as a tool to bring peace, and the fact that Sanogo, the man who was the coup leader, is possibly not behind this peace deal. What do you make of that?
I think that the army is not a monolithic institution in Mali. I would agree with some of the points that have been made just a few seconds ago. But I would say that clearly there is a part of the military around Captain Sanogo representing perhaps the more conservative elites of this military, actually very highly and heavily supported by the U.S. training and U.S. presence in the previous years. What we have seen in the past few months of the French military intervention and the ECOWAS intervention of these past few months is actually the training of a very substantial military force, and I would say even within the military, a new elite that is emerging out of this training process and this capacity building process. So I would not be surprised. Yes, of course, the items of corruption that have been mentioned before do exist, and most probably they will continue to exist for the months and years and perhaps decades to come. But I see definitely that there is a window of opportunity, there is hope, and there are new elites coming to the front.
But I guess the immediate problem will be the army returning to Kidal, and I did ask the chief negotiator if he can guarantee that there's not going to be retribution against the fighters who remain there. I mean, what are the chances of that happening? We've been seeing atrocities committed on both sides. Why won't it happen again?
That is true. The reason why this will probably not happen again is simply the international presence, which is going to be very substantial in the coming months. And I think that this agreement allows for this to happen. A lot more international observation. You know very well that at the time of the French intervention in the spring of this year, there were relatively few images, few cameras that were able to go around the country and report on the fighting and the exactions that took place. I think that this probably is not going to be possible anymore, simply because of the very substantial international intervention. And this international community, UN intervention, is possible essentially because of the negotiations around I'll call it a coalition of those who are prepared to cooperate and uphold or transform the governance structures in Mali today.
I'm going to bring in some comments that were made on our Facebook page, and I think they're obviously pretty relevant to this discussion. Jack Dowdy says, if peace can last, then fine, but what if it doesn't? The consecutive governments of Mali have continued to neglect the Tuareg people, and this scenario will likely repeat itself in the future. And Remo Uche tells us the Tuaregs have only wasted our time and lives and shouldn't be given a presidential red carpet or amnesty. Janet Paulin writes, anything is better than war, but it is in the manner of how their vision is realized through the distribution of wealth and opportunity that will be the key to long-lasting peace. Alessandro, let's just pick up on that point made by Janet about distribution of wealth and opportunity. That is incredibly important at the moment, because that hasn't been happening for a long time.
It is a real crucial problem because in the past anyway, one of the solutions that has always been envisaged during the peace negotiations of the 1990s, for example, when decentralization was introduced during the interim government, up to the 1992 election was, okay, let's redistribute the possibility of regional administrations to bid for development funds, rehabilitation funds after the return of the refugees to Mali. Now, unfortunately, the way in which those funds were managed in the end were in some ways not very fair. They didn't reach the people who most needed it. But the crux of the matter was, in the end, that in 2001, the Malian government introduced a new administrative institution called ADIN, which re-centralized the management of development funds. And this, of course, caused much grievances, and the end result of it all was that the North still needs schools, hospitals, infrastructure, roads, transports, and everything else. So I don't think that unless there is a political will amongst the people in the north of the country and the people in the south of the country to manage the aid that will be pumped in. I mean, during the 15th of May meeting in Brussels, enormous sums were promised. I do not think that it is just a matter of giving money out. The matter is how it will be managed and invested, and what will be the follow-up and the, if you want, action of accompanying the investment of these funds in the north.
Okay.
That will determine whether the Tuareg will be in a position to grow out of their misery, basically.
Actually, paint us a picture of Kidal and how the Tuareg live, how difficult it is for them to survive in the country, and what their needs are that need to be addressed so that they don't continue looking for an independent state.
Oh yes, it's very, very hard. As we all know, the Tuareg have faced a lot of massacres and killings by the Malian army and Nigerians and other militias acting in the area like Gandakor. We have almost 70% of the Tuareg have been displaced and driven out of their houses, and also their houses has been attacked and demolished by the Malian army. And also we have a lot of grievances that has not addressed in this agreement, and it's not going to be addressed unless the international and the Mali itself want it to be really to solve this matter. The only solution of this problem is to give the Tuareg their independence and their autonomy. As we all know, all the agreements that have been said between the Tuareg and the Tuareg rebellions since 1963 until 2000 and 2006, the last one, the Mali couldn't have not been promised, kept their promise, and I don't think they are going to be able to keep their promise at this time. Especially they are having these powers which are lying, helping them, France and other other African countries.
Again, and obviously it's incredibly important, excuse me jumping in here, actually it's incredibly important to secure Mali, because it's such a strategic place in West Africa. Because Western countries are worried that al-Qaeda-linked fighters in the north could destabilize neighboring countries. Many Tuareg fighters returned to Mali from Libya via Algeria after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Algeria is facing pressure to deal with armed groups seeking refuge in the south. Mali's eastern neighbour, Niger, is also at risk of being destabilized by rebel fighters. Niger is strategically important to France because it provides uranium for France's nuclear industry. And though Nigeria doesn't directly neighbour Mali, it too is facing an insurgency problem from al-Qaeda-linked fighters Boko Haram. Alexander, again, it just shows why this is so important to secure Mali, why this is a legitimate peace process.
Yes, well, I think you've outlined many of the issues, starting with Algeria, then into Libya, now dealing with the particular issue at hand in Mali, Nigeria becoming a very hot issue, I would say, again, after 20 or so years. So I think it's very difficult for the international community to be able to put out all of these fires at the same time. And if there can be a peace, a ceasefire, a peace, even if this is imperfect, conflict, and I've heard a lot of criticism against this peace process, but at least it has the merit of starting the negotiations. And indeed, as the other commentators have made it clear, the solutions will be political, and there can now be political solutions, political deals cut between the major powers, the major actors, because the international community is going to be intensely involved.
And let's leave it on that note. Alexandra Votreves with those final words. Akli Shika also talking to us, and Alessandra Gifreda. And thank you, of course, for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want, you can send us your feedback by email to insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye for now.